Good day everyone and welcome to another lecture video on the cell types and modifications. So this is your first colloquium lecture video after your first monthly exam. And this is your fourth lesson and the final lesson for the coverage of your first quarterly achievement test. So let's get started. So for the objectives of our lesson, we will first need to describe the structure and function of the different cell types of the body, and then give examples of cell modifications found in plants and animals. So for this lecture, we will only be covering the first objective, to describe the structure and function of the different cell types of the body. So, first things first, what kind of cells do you have in your body? I will give you the time to think. Can you remember the names of the cells that are found in your body? Perhaps you can recall your cheek cells, which you have seen already under the microscope in your space lab activity last time. Or you can remember your blood cells, or even your bone cells. Some of you would say brain cells, or even sperm cells, egg cells. All of these are actually cells that are found in your body. So, let's now try to describe the structure and function of these different cell types in our body. And we begin it first with the stem cells. Stem cells are unspecialized cells. This means they are very basic in terms of their form and function. At the same time, they can actually, or they have the capability to differentiate into specialized cells. That means they are totipotent. So, this basically means that this cell has the capability of becoming any type of cell. For example, a stem cell can become a future blood cell, or it can be a future brain cell, or it can be a future sperm cell, or any other cell in the body. But if you are fated to become a different cell, you can no longer go back. Okay, so for example, if you're fated to be a brain cell, you'll never become a blood cell, or you'll never become a kidney cell, or any cell apart from being a brain cell, right? So, just remember, when you are totipotent, you are capable of becoming anything. If you're already specialized, you cannot return to your totipotent state, and you cannot transform into other types of cells. Okay? Now, stem cells, aside from the fact that they are unspecialized, they can divide and replicate many times to replenish and even repair the damaged tissues of the body. As you can see on the diagram on the right, a stem cell is fated to become anything that it can be. It can be an immune cell, or a cell that is like a white blood cell. It can become the sex cells, or muscle cells, or even fat cells, bone cells, blood cells, and nervous cells, or even epithelial cells. But when they become specialized, they can no longer return to their original state. Okay? So, basically, for human beings, we came from stem cells. And the very first stem cell in our history as an individual person will be the zygote. As you recall, the zygote is the union between your egg cell and the sperm cell. When they met, they become fertilized and they became you. And just imagine that very single cell is totipotent. It is a stem cell in itself, which is capable of becoming the future parts of your body. So for every cell that you have from head down to your foot, all of these cells came from a very single cell at the time when you were inside the womb of your mother. That cell is the zygote. And the zygote again is a type of a stem cell. Okay? And aside from stem cells, we also have blood cells. And you are familiar with this already, hopefully. Blood cells have different types. They can be the red and white blood cells and even the platelets. So we begin first with the red blood cells, as you can see in the illustration or the 3D model on the right. Red blood cells have their own color because of the pigment called hemoglobin. And hemoglobin is a type of protein that has iron in it. And that iron easily attracts oxygen. Okay? And when blood is oxygenated, the reaction between the iron and the oxygen will cause the reddish coloration. Okay? So the red color of the blood is due to the hemoglobin that interacts with oxygen. Okay? At the same time, okay, our red blood cells is capable of carrying that oxygen, okay, from the lungs to the rest of the body through our blood vessels. We need to know that oxygen is needed by the body, okay, so that we can process energy. Remember the role of the mitochondria. Okay? The mitochondria, aside from it being the powerhouse of the cell, it is capable to transform energy coming from food molecules, and that process will involve many oxygen. Okay? So that oxygen should come from the red blood cells that circulate around the body. So basically, the red blood cells function for just transporting that oxygen we need inside the bloodstream. Okay? At the same time, what shape does the red blood cell have? Okay? How can you describe the shape of the red blood cells? So in this case, as you can see, okay, they look like donuts. Some of you would say that they look like plates or like wheels. But the way we describe it in our terms as biologists is that they are biconcave. Okay? So they look like donuts with spaces inside them. And the reason why they are shaped like that is because of what? So I hope you can try to think of an answer. Okay, when I asked this question in the previous colloquium, they answered that this is for the red blood cells to get into the blood vessels easily, smoothly, no, and smoothly. So in that case, that shape will allow the smooth entry of the blood cells into the bloodstream. At the same time, because they are shaped like donuts, they have spaces inside them. Okay, that part can actually be concentrated with oxygen that can be carried throughout the bloodstream. Okay, so the reason why the red blood cells have that kind of biconcave shape is due to two reasons. One is for the smooth flow of the blood cells throughout the bloodstream, and second, for it to carry enough oxygen inside its biconcave structure. Okay? Aside from the red blood cells, we also have the white blood cells. And if you will recall Cells at Work, which is an anime series about blood cells, I hope you'll watch it. I recommend that anime. And as you will see from that anime series, white blood cells there are actually the soldiers of the body. And it's because they are the cells of our immune system which destroy the pathogens and provides us our immunity. And let's recall what are pathogens again. Okay, pathogens are the harmful creatures that enter our body, which could be in the form of bacteria, viruses, or even parasites like worms that can enter into our bloodstream. So basically, these white blood cells can actually engulf these foreign particles that would prevent us from getting disease later on. Okay? So white blood cells are typically larger than red blood cells, and they come in various shapes, various sizes, and various functions to kill the pathogens around them. Okay? And finally, we have the platelets. And in the anime Cells at Work, they're actually the kids who are carrying these cloth-like structures to heal the wounds. And that's the function of the platelets. Okay, these are small structures in our bloodstream that help to clot the blood and prevent excessive blood loss due to damaged blood cells or blood vessels rather. Okay, so when you have a damage on your blood vessels, your platelets will work, okay, such that they will carry this cloth of fibrin, which will later on become the wound, and eventually that wound will be healed later on. And again, the role of those wounds is to prevent blood from going out of your body. Okay? So let's recall again our blood cells. We have your red blood cells that function for transport, your white blood cells that act for defense, and your platelets which function for preventing excessive blood loss, okay, and the formation of your wounds. I hope that is clear with all of you. Okay? And how do these blood cells form? Okay? If you'll go back, if you have watched Cells at Work, there is this one episode that would show you how the cells were born and even trained, okay, before they enter the bloodstream. And they actually take place in your red bone marrow. Okay? Your red bone marrow is located inside the bones of the body. And in these bones, okay, your blood cells are manufactured. So they typically come from stem cells that are located in the bone marrow. Okay? So typically, in the long bones of children and adults, you will see that it's the red bone marrow that forms all of these blood cells. Sometimes it could come from the bones of, in the bones of the adult, it would come from the skull and the rest of the flat bones. Okay? So take note, it's not the heart that makes the blood. Okay? It's the heart that pumps the blood. Okay? That's the role of the heart. It's just a muscle that will pump the blood all throughout the body. But the blood is formed inside the bones. Okay? And then we have fat cells, which are also known as adipocytes. Okay? These are the major components of your adipose tissues, or basically your fat tissues. And they contain stored fat molecules that are later used for energy. Okay? But aside from that, fat cells have a lot of interesting functions. Okay? It's not just for the storage of fat, but they also have endocrine roles to make hormones that influence the following activities inside the body. One is sex hormone metabolism. Fat cells can also make hormones that can also influence blood pressure regulation. It can also induce insulin sensitivity, okay, to sugar or blood sugar levels inside our body. It can also be used for storage and use of fats. And finally, fat cells can also induce hormones for blood clotting and signaling or communication between the cells. And then we have the epithelial cells. Epithelial cells are all the cells that line up the outer surfaces of the organs and lining of blood vessels and cavities. You've seen them already under the microscope. Let's recall your cheek cells, which you have obtained inside your mouth. They basically line up, okay, the covering of our mouth. So, in that case, what you're observing under the microscope back then were actually epithelial cells of the cheek. Okay? Again, the role of the epithelial cells are to cover, okay, or to line, or to make up this lining of our organs inside the body. Okay? And then we have endothelial cells, and these are a type of epithelial cells that line up the circulatory and lymphatic systems. So they basically line up the blood vessels, okay, and the lymph nodes or the lymph vessels inside the body. Again, when we talk about the lining, okay, all you need to remember is that it's the epithelial cells that would line up or cover these organs. Okay? Recall your cheek cells. They are flat structures. And they are basically flat because they just need to line up anything. Okay? And now we have nerve cells, or also known as neurons. And these cells make up the basic unit of the nervous system. So what makes up the nervous system? Let's recall. That will be your brain, your spinal cord, and all the nerves inside your body. Okay? The nerve cells contain two main parts. The first is a cell body, okay, which contains the nucleus of the neuron and the nerve processes or the finger-like projections that conduct or transmit signals, okay, from the cell body or to the cell body. So let's see what are these structures inside the nerve cells. And now, how does these signals transfer from one place to another? So let's recall the finger-like projections as you can see in the nerve cells. So here, we have a central cell body, okay, which again contains the nucleus of the neuron, including the other organelles that are found in the cell. And the finger-like projections or the root-like projections that come out from the cell body would be the dendrites, okay? These structures that emerge from the cell body are called your dendrites. And the dendrites are the ones that receive signals from other nerve cells. Okay? Now, as the signals are received by the dendrites, the signals are transferred to the cell body, and eventually, the signal will be transferred to the axon. Okay? And the axon is found as the tail of the nerve cell. And the axon will send the signals to the next neuron or to the next nerve cell. So how do we transfer the messages or the signals? We have the dendrites as the receiving parts, the central body or the cell body, and then we have the axon, which will send the signal away from the cell. So after sending it away from the neuron, it will send the signal to the dendrite of the next cell. And then that dendrite will transfer the signal then to the cell body, and then transfer it to the axon, and then it will be transferred again to another dendrite of another neuron. Okay, so I hope that way of messaging is clear for the nerve cells. And then we have the sex cells, which are also known as gametes. So for every biological sex, there is a different form of gametes. So for biological males, they have the sperm cells. And for biological females, they have the egg cells. So sperm cells are relatively smaller than your egg cells. At the same time, they have this tail, which we call a flagellum, which allows the sperm to move towards the egg. However, the egg, on the other hand, is larger than the sperm cell, and at the same time, it is immotile. That means it cannot move on its own. So it just waits there persistently for a sperm cell to arrive. Okay? And when they unite, okay, the zygote will form. So sex cells from each sex need to meet so that they can form a new organism of the same species. So that union is a process which we call fertilization, which results to a zygote. And as we recall from the earlier slides, the zygote is the first stem cell of human beings. From the zygote, all of the cells of the body will arise. Okay? And at the same time, sex cells undergo meiosis rather than mitosis. I hope you can still recall the lessons you've learned from your junior high school on cell division. So when we say meiosis, it's the division of cells, resulting to new cells that have half the number of chromosomes as their parent cells. For humans, we have 46 cells inside our cells of our body. But when we need to form sperm cells or egg cells, they need to have 23 chromosomes. Okay, and why? Because you need 46 chromosomes in the new organism later on. So if you need to develop a new human being, it needs to have 46 chromosomes. So 23 should come from the sperm, and then 23 should come from the egg cell. So you get half of the chromosomes from either your mother and your father. Okay? So again, meiosis is the type of cell division that allows the reduction of chromosomes into half. But if it's mitosis, okay, the resulting cells will have the same number of chromosomes as their parent. Okay? So I hope that's clear, but don't worry, we will discuss more meiosis and mitosis in our future lectures in the upcoming second quarter. Okay? And then we have the cancer cells, which are cells that result from mutations that are often influenced by the several factors mentioned. We have chemical exposure, such as to carcinogens. So when a substance is considered carcinogenic, it has the capability to induce cancer. Okay? An example of carcinogenic substances would include the black spots you see on barbecue when you grill them. So these black spots, when you consume a lot of amounts of it, that is going to be a risk for cancer. Another cause of cancer are radiation and ultraviolet light. So when you're exposed to UV rays, especially if they come from the sun, okay, and you are exposed for a long period of time, they tend to cause that damage in your DNA that would eventually trigger the formation of cancer cells. Okay? Aside from radiation and chemical exposure, sometimes cancer cells arrive randomly. Okay? They tend to form randomly because of random replication errors in the DNA. So there were cases that when DNA was duplicated in the cell, there were chances that some nucleotides were mismatched. And in that case, those mismatches can cause cancer later on. And then we have viral infection. Sometimes it's the viruses that cause the DNA damage, triggering the formation of cancer cells. Okay? And another interesting property or characteristic of cancer cells is that they tend to multiply very rapidly. This is because they lose their sensitivity to anti-growth signals. That is the regulation process of the cell itself. Okay? That regulation process is anchored on the DNA of the cell. And when that regulation has been destroyed because of mutations, okay, what happens? Okay, the DNA won't make its instruction for the formation of its regulatory proteins. That means there will be no police officers inside that cell that would monitor the quality of the DNA. So even if the DNA replication went wrong, nothing would stop it. Thus, it will keep on dividing and dividing, even if it has the wrong quality of DNA. Okay? So, this causes the cells to lose already the capability or the ability to undergo cell death or apoptosis. So, apoptosis is the programmed cell death, okay, which allows the cell to die because it has the wrong DNA. But since the cell itself doesn't know how to control itself anymore, okay, nothing would stop it. Thus, it will keep on multiplying. So, when you have cancer, you have actually a different organism that lives inside you because it has already a different DNA in its own. Okay? Its DNA is manipulated, very different already from the DNA you have. And sometimes, cancer is rarely or can rarely be stopped. Okay, that's why until now we're still trying to figure out what's the best cure for cancer. Okay, so I hope you will realize something about this part. But don't worry, we will be discussing more about cancer on the lessons on mitosis, meiosis, and how the cell divides. Okay, so that will be taken in the second grading period. So for any questions, please reach me out through my email, andrejax.falyaria@dyci.edu.ph. Okay? So you may also reach out to your LOMs so that they can send me the questions through the LOMs group chat. Okay? And now here's our question. Cancer cells can produce tumors that eventually lead to cancer. This is one of the top causes of deaths in the Philippines and around the planet. Now the question is, nakamamatay din ba ang mga cancer ng lipunan? Sino? O ano sila? At paano natin sila mapupuksa? Take note, when you have cancer, it's actually a burden inside your body. It's something that is not you, but it lives inside you. Right? So we have to get rid of them. What does that tell about cancers of society? How can we get rid of them? I hope you can ponder something about this. Of course, I know it's not related to biology, but I hope you can still relate to it, when it comes to how we view the world around us and our society. Okay? And this is where I end my lecture video on the different cell types we can see in our body. See you in our next video.